What's up everyone, it's Gary with Fresh from the Farm Fungi. Today I'm going to do a video on how to verify cereal dilutions using a compound microscope. So I'm starting out my breeding project for 2023 and I'm going to be doing a brand new technique that I've been working on for a couple years now. And in order to do that, I have to take my spores and dilute them so that each volume that I'm going to be aspirating onto a petri dish, or in this case I'm going to be using a micro well plate, I'm trying to ensure that each drop contains one spore. So if you've seen my videos in the past on breeding, I use a cereal dilution and then I'll plate out those spores. Usually it takes about 7 to 10 days for those spores to germinate, and then going back to that original cereal dilution, I can then isolate single spores. Now this technique is going to speed up that process by 7 to 10 days. However, it's not going to be the same because each single spore that's isolated might not be viable. So if you're using this technique on an older spore print, just be warned that you might have a lot of blank plates or blank wells. I recommend using a fresh spore print. This one is from last August. So I'm going to be breeding Piapino mushrooms using a cereal dilution and then plating onto a micro well plate. I'm going to isolate haploid cultures and then cross them on another micro well plate, and then I'm going to fruit them out and figure out which one's the best. This will save time, space, and you're gonna get a lot of variances between different mushrooms. So I'll flip this around, go through my dilution process, and then we'll work through this on the microscope, and that way I'll have my starting solution so that I could begin my breeding project for 2023. Alright everyone, so I have my workstation set up. I've got my microscope, which I'm going to use to verify these dilutions. I've got these dilution tubes. They don't have to be sterile because the spore print that I'm going to be using isn't sterile. And then I've got a glass syringe here, which I'm going to be filling with sterile water. And then I've got my cereal dilution tubes on the rack. I've got a 1 ml pipetter that I'm going to be using, a vortexer to mix, and just these plastic lids for my dilution tubes. I've also got my concave slides and my slide covers, which I'm going to be using to verify my dilution on the microscope. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is fill up my stock solution tube with 10 mils. So I'll just write an S for stock, and then this is going to be my 10 to the 1. So that's a 10 dilution. This is going to be 10 to the 2, which is the 100 dilution, and then 10 to the 3, which is my 1000 dilution. 10 to the 4, which is my 10,000, and that should be a pretty good range here between 1,000 and 10,000 dilution factor. So I'm gonna open up my glass syringe here, and this is just a really nifty tool for dilutions because I can get a pretty precise volume. So on the first tube, I'm going to be filling it with 10 mils of concentrated spore solution. And then these other tubes I'll fill with 9 mils of water so that I can do my dilutions. So I'll start off just by filling these other tubes with 9. Here, there's a little air bubble. And it doesn't have to be super accurate, but the more accurate the better. So there's going to be 9 mils. And the reason that I'm doing 9 is because for the serial dilution, I'll be taking 1 mil from the previous dilution and then inoculating it into the next one to make a 10x dilution. Now for this one, I'm going to get that full 10 mils, and then I'm going to carefully just stir up some spores. And I should get a pretty highly concentrated spore solution here. So I'll go ahead and inoculate those 10 mils, and there might be a few left, so I'll just tilt this. Oh yeah, definitely gonna get some healthy spores here. And you can even rinse that syringe out. So that is going to be my stock solution. Now you don't have to use a vortexer. You can just shake it up, which we have one right over here. Let's see how close I was for those volumes. Pretty spot on there. Okay, so I've got my stock solution, and I'll just set my syringe off to the side, and I will use my pipetter to transfer 1 mil of my stock solution into my first dilution. And I'm going to go ahead and mix that so you can see how much lighter it is in color, which means that there's less spores, hopefully 10 times less. And then I'll go ahead and use the pipetter to transfer 10 mils. Sometimes you can mix just by aspirating like this. And then you're going to want to change your tips because there could be spores in that residual dilution. Or I'll just leave these lids off for now because I'm going to be making different slides. So this is the 100x dilution tube. And we're just going to keep going down the line So this will be the 1000. And then we'll go down. All the way to 10,000. Okay guys, so I've got my dilutions here, and in order to standardize these slides, I'm going to dial this back down to 100 microliters or 0.1 liter. It's probably better to use a 500 ml pipetter, but this is all I have, so I'm just going to be rolling this back to 100, and then that way it will just standardize the volumes that I'm taking from all these dilutions. Okay, so I'm ideally searching for a solution that contains 0 to 10 spores per drop. So it's probably going to be one of these two, and I'll go ahead and mark these slides. So I've got my 10, 100,000, 10,000 dilution, and I'm going to carefully put 0.1 mil of each onto that slide. Okay. Now I'm going to put my cover slide on these different dilutions, and then we will go spore hunting under the microscope. So you just want to be careful you don't get air bubbles. Alright, and then I'll go ahead and cap my tubes so that we will have the original samples to go back and do our breeding. Alright, so I just showed you the process to make these serial dilution tubes, and then I transferred 0.1 mil onto each glass slide. Now this is kind of an estimation, but I'm just going to search for the field of view that has 0 to 1 spore per field of view. Now the best way to do that, to find the 1 spore per drop would be to scan that entire whole slide. However, I believe that some of these spores won't be viable, so getting 1 CFU per drop is maybe a little bit better for this procedure. I have a video on how to isolate a single spore using a pipette tip. You can see how tedious that is. This is kind of a quick and dirty method. I still think that we're going to get some really good results. I'm going to go ahead and scan these different slides in order so that you can see the difference between the serial dilutions. All right, let's flip this around and I'll go through the scope. All right, so the first slide up is going to be this 10:1 dilution. So I'll just start off by pulling this up on the scope. And right now we're at a 10x magnification. So you can see all those different spores that are present. So I'm going to zoom this in to 40x. Now there's a way to calculate how many spores are exactly in this solution, but just for the scope of this, I just wanted to show the different dilution tubes. All right, so we're getting into focus. And I'll go ahead and record this. So this is the first dilution tube that we have. And of course it starts to freeze. All right, there we go. Now look at all these different fragments. It almost looks like some mycelium, but I can see spores mixed in there. Now let's go to the next dilution. Alright, so that was a 10:1. Now we're going to go to 10:2. And you can see much less debris on this slide. Still getting some fragments and artifacts, but it's looking better. I'll just wait till it starts to calm down a little bit. But I'm definitely seeing some spores in the field of vision, and it's still really concentrated. All right, it's starting to settle down a little bit. But you can see there's spores all present throughout here, and it looks like there's definitely some mycelium or possible fragments from the gill tissue, which that's one of the drawbacks about taking spore prints directly on the surface. Yeah, it looks like some tissue got in there. That's okay. We'll just dilute that out. All right, so that was the 10:2. Now let's go and take a look at the 10⁻³ dilution. So this is going to be 10 times less fragments than what we're seeing on that previous slide. And you can see right off the bat, we're not really Oh yeah. There's some good spores coming into view right there. All right, so this is more what I was hoping for, but you can see that this one has maybe 1, 2, 3 spores or pieces of tissue in every field of view. So that's still, I would say, 3 to 5. And I apologize for the sensitivity, but right here's a good view. Okay, so 10 to the third, we're getting about 2, 3, 5 spores per field of view, which is a little bit higher than I wanted. So I have a feeling that this 10 to the 4 is going to give us exactly what we're looking for. Yeah, if I can dial that in, you can see there's a really good spore. There's some fragments, there's a spore. There's two right next to each other. Okay, so I'm gonna pull this one and do our last dilution, and hopefully that will clean up all these debris that we're seeing. And once again, right off the bat, we're getting a lot cleaner picture. Still quite a bit of debris. But let's search for some spores. There's one. So you can see this one right here. Piece of another one. Up, there's one here. So minus all this debris, we're getting a pretty decent concentration of spores. Right there's a really good one too. Drifting away on us. And to see how we're scanning and we're not really getting that many spores. This is a really good indication that we're going to be able to get some good isolates. So yeah, I've only seen about 2 spores so far, and I've scanned about 30 different field of view. So we're definitely in that 0 to 10 range. We possibly could use that previous dilution as well, but there's a few times where we saw multiple spores in the same field. And right there, that's a really good spore. And if I had steadier hands, I could isolate that one with this pipette, move it onto a dish, and that would be the start of a haploid colony. So I'll just leave it on there. And this is at 40x objective. So it's very sensitive. 400 times magnification. This looks about 20 microns in length. So this is the perfect spore. This is exactly what we're looking for. So I'm going to go back to this 10 to the 4th dilution and continue our breeding project. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that video on verifying cereal dilutions using the microscope. So you can see the difference between this 1 to 10 dilution. That slide was very cluttered. It looked like there was a lot of debris from the gill tissue. So if you want to eliminate that, you can take your print a little bit elevated off the surface. I got kind of lazy and dropped that cap right onto this petri dish, which is why it caused all of those fragments to show up. However, as we diluted our sample out, you could see that the debris became less and less, and then deciphering those chunks from spores became really easy, especially with these last 2 dilution tubes. So the 1 to 1,000 and the 1 to 10,000 tube, you could easily find spores that were separated from that debris. You could probably get away with using this 1 to 1,000 dilution if you wanted to. However, with the micro well technique that I'm going to be using, there's going to be 24 different opportunities to catch a spore. So I'm going to use this 10 to the 4 dilution, or 1 to 10,000, and that way hopefully we get some haploid isolates, and I'll be able to cross those over onto their own petri dishes. They'll form their clamp connections, and then we'll have a viable strain. I hope you enjoyed that video. I'm going to go ahead and splice up some of this footage from the laptop, and hopefully it'll come out a little clearer than just recording that on my phone. If you're interested in learning more about microscopy and mycology, check out our playlist. We have a bunch of videos from very beginner to expert level. I'm really excited to teach more with the microscope. I've held off for a few years just because it can get really tedious trying to, focus in and do these types of procedures. However, I think that scaling up this breeding program is going to really benefit the community. So I thought I would share my methods with all of you guys. So give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed these videos. It really helps spread the word. Subscribe if you're looking forward to more mycology videos like these. I'm going to continue this process into our breeding season for 2023. All right, guys, I'm super excited to see what comes out of this. We've got some good looking spores, and on the next video, I'll show you the new technique for micro well breeding mushrooms. All right, until next time, much love.